Welcome back to another episode of the Hidden Potential Podcast. I'm your host, Homer Hargrove, and today we're going to be talking about the idea of going from obligation to opportunity and really about reconditioning our mindset when it comes to our work and our leadership. And as we go into this, it might sound simple or even like a little bit cliche, but I want you to capture this idea because the shifts when it comes to our deeper motivational aspirations, it's about reconditioning our perspectives so that you actually start enjoying your work again, finding purpose in your responsibilities, and using even gratitude to unlock this passion that is still kind of like stored away in what you may have already started to feel like a grind. And it's this idea that within our leadership, within our different careers or roles, that we often get to this point of feeling burnt out to where the things that we might at one point felt excited to do now feel like this thing that we're dreading to do. We feel a sense of dread as we're about to go into that meeting. We feel a sense of dread as we're about to go share a talk. And it's this idea of trying to go back to that place to where you feel passionate and you look at it as an opportunity instead of an obligation. And so when it comes, whether it's starting off, it's this idea that when that moment when that work turns into weight, and it's those moments where you feel like your routine or your schedule is now your new boss. And it feels like the meetings, the projects, the responsibilities start to feel like those obligations instead of opportunities. And it's like these moments that we may have even prayed for at some point now become things that we resent. And it's not always that the work needs to change. It's often, sometimes, how we see it, how we see the work, the perspective of the work. And don't get me wrong, there's times where the job does need to change. You know, look back on episodes I've done, when is it time to change jobs? And analyze that, see, maybe that's it. But today we're specifically talking about where it's not the work that needs to be changed, but our perspective about it. It's a weary attitude that can make even purposeful work feel meaningless. And if you're finding yourself dreading things that you once felt excited about, it's that it might be that time to have a mental reset. Not a full career reset, but a mental reset. So let's talk about the I have to versus I get to mindset. It's those moments where I have to write this report versus I get to create something that brings clarity and direction. I have to lead this meeting versus I get to influence and empower people who trust my voice. I have to show up early versus I get to be someone who sets the tone and shows consistency. It's not about having a fake positivity, but it's going into anchoring your perspective into the meaning behind the task. You know, one thing that I felt was valuable for me before starting our church, and it was in the early days of my leadership. One little practice I had, like this kind of like ambition, is that I wanted to see if I could bring passion to the seemingly most uninteresting parts of church. And so I started volunteering in like the parking lot ministry, the kids ministry, the nursery, and pretty much anywhere where it was an area that people didn't necessarily want to be in. And I went there to try to see if I could contrive meaning from this seemingly unwanted job. And I found this sense of value of being able to pull gold out of the dirt, if that makes sense. And it requires you to recondition your mind to see certain things. You know, as a simple example, like the parking lot ministry, it's not necessarily glamorous. It's this idea where you're just in the parking lot and you're kind of waving cars in and saying you can park right here, and you're in the heat. All this, you know, everyone's going inside. They get to talk to each other, etc. It's like you're kind of like in this isolated place. Separated while you're guiding people towards this direction. And you can look at it as like seemingly like necessary but unmotivating. Is it like, well, it helps people to park, so I guess someone should do it. And And it's this idea of like you could dread even the simplest task like that. For me, one thing that I pulled from it is like, man, what if I reconditioned this mindset and I looked at it as like this? This is the very first person. I get to be the very first person to greet someone, or the very first face for somebody arriving at church. And it made me have this like passion or this ambition to try to make that very first experience the best experience they could have. And I had a lot of fun with it. You know, I really, I got to, I like humor. So I was able to, joke around with people as they were coming in, give like a high level of excitement. And it made me excited about this duty that had no excitement attached to it, but it brought excitement, and I got to see even better results. You know, how I did this task really affected the results of the people that it was interacting with. So this idea of reconditioning your mind, I want to give this some practical ways to reset our perspectives and renew that sense of enjoyment with your work. Number one is name what you prayed for. Take a moment to remember what it is that you once dreamed of, and that position you have now. That opportunity, that platform, there's probably a season in which you were asking God even the spiritual implication of for exactly this kind of influence. Maybe it's not the way that you thought, but does it fit? You know, now that you're in this area, is it adjacent to what you prayed for? Is it adjacent to something that you want to do? And it's this idea of just simply going into this perspective of, is there part of this task or job that I'm dreading that was also along at some point something I was hoping for, expecting? And go back to that sense of wonder. Remind yourself that this used to be part of my goal. And it could very well be a stepping stone to your ultimate goal. And it's just this idea of allowing yourself to see some possible spiritual implications of in having this tone of gratitude. And now let's really talk about that, practicing targeted gratitude. Instead of just saying, I'm grateful for my job, why don't you be specific in the sense of, I'm grateful that I get to use my creativity every day, or I'm grateful that people trust me to lead them. You know, try to derive aspects of your role to be grateful for. And when gratitude is specific, it often becomes more powerful. It gives context to why your work matters. Even for me, like I love speaking. I'm a public speaker, but one thing that can often happen is this sense that oh, I've been speaking at this place for so long. Like say, I'll give an example of recovery centers. You know, it's like a weekly thing, and it's sometimes it could feel like, oh man, exasperating. Like just resetting a group of people, and am I actually getting somewhere? And there's like a lot of different things that you have to, in a sense, like work through in your mind. But coming back to this place where of recognizing, man, even if there's a moment where I don't like where I'm going to be speaking at, I go back to this place of gratitude to where I can say, but this is something that I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to speak. I've always wanted to be able to help people through talks, and I'm able to do that. And it helps me to come back to this place of remembering why it matters and remembering these things that were connected to my dreams at one point. And it helps revitalize that work. And also number 3 is connecting your role to impact. You know, it's again, we're talking about losing the joy in our work because we lose sight of what is actually doing. Ask yourself, who is affected by what I do? Who benefits? Who's growing? Who's getting clarity? Who's getting hope? Who's getting strengthened because of what I'm doing to show up? And when you can trace level of purpose with this impact, it starts to feel worth it again. And I gave the example of like recovery centers. There's like literally a time period to where I was contemplating like, maybe I've like run this horse, you know, to the ground. Maybe it's time for me to make a shift and I should say my goodbye to recovery work. And literally that week, I had multiple people from different recovery centers like almost like overly admonishing me like, man, this is the best talk I've had ever since being at this recovery center. Thank you so much for. I'm like, oh man, like you're making it. I was right about to tell you I'm just gonna quit. And it's like this irony to where I was getting thrown in my face the level of impact that reminded me of the sense of value and worth to what I did. Y'all dig what I'm saying? And uh, I think that if we were to even go beyond just like say you understand the impact, but there's also times where it's like, well, there's other people that can make this impact too. What I really want to do is plan A, and this is more like plan B. And I'm not ready for plan A, but I'm dreading being at plan B because I want to be at plan A. I hope that makes sense what I'm saying. What I would project to you is this. Look at the work that you're doing as practice for the ultimate thing you want to be doing. As another example for recovery centers, like I have different aspirations of giving talks in different spaces, and there's literally a period to where for over a year at one recovery center, I started with just one, and at one recovery center, there's less than 10 people that would show up to the group. Every now and then it'd be like up to 20, but you're talking about like a really small group that I'm taking a lot of time to pour my heart out and prepare talks, and to have like this small group as far as the retention is not that exciting, and it's like, well, maybe this is just not worth it. But redefining my role, I would look at it as like this, beyond just the impact. Like, these people matter, of course, they still found value in what I had to say, but as another factor, I had to realize that I was still redefining what this work is doing for me, because yes, the impact for them, but I was also getting practice. That year of speaking over and over and over, just consistently, really helped me to hone my craft of being a speaker. I am a night and day of a speaker compared to before and after doing this grind of going to talk to a group of 10 people, but because of that practice, because I was able to still find a sense of worth beyond the impact, even for myself, I was able to craft something that better prepared me for plan A, better prepared me to where after that, I had multiple recovery centers reach out to me saying, can you come speak at our place? We're gonna make it mandatory for the whole session, for the whole, all the clients to go to your group. And it's like, I would have never been positioned or ready for the higher volume if I didn't practice on the lesser. Does that make sense? And so redefine your role. And it's not that you're just leading a team, but you are sharpening your skills as a leader. You're not just starting a business or the early stages of business, but you are developing your problem-solving skills. You are developing building vision. You are developing being an impact creator. You're reframing your purpose and your titles and in how you view your touch points of influence. Because when our work becomes meaningful again, it becomes fulfilling again. So here's some questions for reflection. What's one part of my work that I've started to resent but used to be grateful for? Number two, who is positively impacted by the work that I do? And again, even if you're just and not to, I'm not putting a disregard to plumbers, but it's like the idea of, well, like, I'm just a plumber. Being a plumber, you're showing up for people in their homes where they are completely ill-equipped and unprepared, and you're helping to restore their life. Like, there's valuable impact for even just service work, Number three, how can I reframe my role from I have to I get to this week? How can I reframe that in my heart and my mind? And write it down. Use a journal to talk about them to yourself, to brainstorm with God, and bring them, and even in a practical sense, imagine having this conversation with your team, with the people that you're leading or working with. As some closing thoughts, I want you to consider that joy in your work doesn't come from having less to do. It comes from having the right lens in what you're currently doing. And if you've lost that lens, that perspective, it's not too late to reset it. We can be grateful, we can be intentional, and we can see how our mindset shifts can take us from burnout to breakthrough. And all that being said, I hope that you found this episode meaningful for you today. I hope that it breathed some fresh life into your roles. But if you could do me a favor, leave a rating and review for this podcast. It really helped me out and help others be able to see this show in this feed. But until next time, have a great life. Well, there you have it. I hope that this episode was meaningful and edifying for your leadership and your growth within your ministry and organization. Could you do me a favor? Could you leave a rating and review for this podcast? It really helped me out and help others be able to see this show in their feed. You can also visit homerhargrove.com to be able to learn more, connect, or become one of our supporters. Until next time, have a great life.